let's now get into this one here. So, what the issue with access journalism, in particular on the left, the issue with it is that it's doing a couple of things. It's shifting the Overton window. It provides cover for the shifting. That's a better way of playing. It provides cover for the shifting of the Overton window. So provides oops, let me take the S out. Provides cover for moving right, provides cover for the Overton window moving right. And let me explain. It's like, take this interview that we're going to play. It's not an interview, it's a snippet about a particular question. They're asking about force of vote, essentially. So you have this bona fide progressive, people in the professional managerial class, everybody from Merriam Williamson to Breaking Point, so Crystal Ball, to even Breed refer to the lever. They're reporting, and other people I've seen refer to the lever as reporting. So bona fide supposed progressive, who then invites on Ro Khanna. Now, you can play it two ways. Now, if he came on this channel, he came on the network, and Sabby is part of the RBN network. So came on a Sabby channel, and that's not what he got. He didn't get access journalism from Sabby. So, but this is what it does. You bring somebody on the show. I'm a bona fide leftist, and I bring somebody on the show who I am now presenting to my audience as a lefty, when Ro Khanna is clearly not a progressive. Ro Khanna is one of those people who's part of the progressive caucus, who people say most of the people on there are not progressive, but they're just in a caucus. He's one of those people. But when you have a supposed bona fide lefty journalist like David Sirota, who's co-signing Ro Khanna as a bona fide lefty or a bona fide progressive for that matter, that's shifting the Overton window to the right. Now, I don't know if David Sirota knows this, but does he know that Ro Khanna actually said that Hakeem Jeffries is a progressive? Hakeem Jeffries. The same Hakeem Jeffries that created a pact to go after progressives. The same Hakeem Jeffries that Cenk Uygur on TYT, he scolded the squad for voting, or any progressive who would vote for Hakeem Jeffries. But you see the co-signing of Ro Khanna indirectly is the co-signing of whoever Ro Khanna endorses as a progressive. So this willing to make deals and be nice to these representatives, elected officials, so that you have access, produces this. Access journalism produces the shifting to the right. So let's listen to this conversation between David Sirota. It's not the conversation, but a couple of minutes of this. So let's listen.
Let's change gears now for a second. I want to turn to all of the drama that's happened in Congress, specifically in the House. This recent set of votes on Kevin McCarthy becoming Speaker of the House. A lot of brinksmanship from the right, the far right. I mean, the Republican Party is the right, but the far right to try to pressure the House Speaker, or the House Speaker-elect, I guess at that point, or designee, Kevin McCarthy, for concessions. that was shown on TV. I mean, there was a lot of laughing about it, I think, from liberals. I actually saw it as the small d democratic process at work. Democracy involves arguing, involves negotiating, involves concessions. I mean, I don't agree with the concessions that Kevin McCarthy gave, and the results of it are not not what I want to see ideologically, but I think that is democracy at work. The question has come up, why haven't we seen progressives in the House in the past do the same kind of brinksmanship with the Democratic leadership that we have seen the conservative members or the arch conservative members of the Republican conference use against their leadership? In other words, why hasn't there's a perception that the progressive wing of the party has not played hardball with the Democratic leadership.
You see how he's preparing the excuse that Ro Khanna is about to give? You see how he adjusted his question, his speech, his wording? Because he already knows what he brought Ro Khanna on here to do, to play cover for the failings of the progressives and the squad and everybody else on Force to Vote. So he's like, hey, can you go ahead and provide that excuse that I already know that you're going to provide here? So let me back it up just a tad, and you can kind of hear him adjust. Let's go there.
Arch conservative members of the Republican conference use against their leadership. In other words, why hasn't there's a perception that the progressive wing of the...
Now, he was just about to say, why haven't you done that? And then he had to adjust and say, well, there's the perception that you haven't. Because Ro Khanna is about to come in and say, we have done some stuff. You see what access journalism does, what it produces. Do you think that would be any sort of line of questioning if Ro Khanna came on the Nick and CJ show? It's like this strategy is just being fully unmasked as just wholly just ineffective of being nice to these people. Let's continue.
The party has not played hardball with the Democratic leadership. Do you agree with that assessment that it hasn't? And if it hasn't, why hasn't it?
Well, it hasn't played hardball to the extent that some activists want, but I think we did get...
You notice when the professional managerial class use the word activist. But then they want to be like, I'm down with activists when people get shot and killed. We may not be doing it what activists want to do. That's another word for worker. That's what he's saying. In the profession, that's them cleaning up the word worker. You ever been somewhere and somebody's talking in another language and you feel like they're talking about you? That's what that word is used for, to be able to talk about workers in a disgusting way without using the word workers. Activists. Let's hear the disdain for activists. Now, and I doubt that David Sirota will make any correction or push back about his comment on activists. Let's listen.
Get a lot of our concessions in the last 2 years. I mean,
Oops. That is my bad, everybody. This button is tricky here. Okay, here we go.
But it hasn't played hardball to the extent that some activists want, but I think we did get a lot of our concessions in the last 2 years. I mean, we got the child tax credit. We couldn't get it permanent. We got in the American Rescue Plan a lot of the priorities on education and funding. We got a lot of the climate provisions. So I guess the point is that the leadership made a lot more concessions to progressives in terms of some of the concessions they made to conservatives was like, we're going to put people on the rules committee. We're going to put people on these committees. We're going to have you have a seat at the table. A lot of that, the progressives won the last 2 years, not because of the House.
So Ro Khanna is saying progressives did play hardball and they did get concessions. None of the concessions help anybody else but themselves, if they got any. But you see how this retelling of history they're doing? Where was the talk of all of these concessions that you got? How come you're not getting concessions and then coming out and telling us you got concessions? So the negotiations and the concessions are secret? So you can't publicly negotiate. You can't put them on blast. AOC says that'll cause relational harm. And you can't tell us about the concessions until Republicans get concessions, and then you have to backtrack and make up some concessions that you supposedly got. So let's listen some more. Again, this is access journalism gone wrong. Access journalism gone wrong. So let's listen.
House Democrats, but because of Bernie Sanders' campaign, because of Elizabeth Warren's campaign, and people just realized we need progressives matter. And then, so now we're arguing about, well, should we have gotten more? And of course, that's a debate that's worth having, of where do you find the balance of, did we push enough? Did we get enough? Could we have gotten more? And that's, the thing with the Medicare for all that I'm for it. I'm for Bernie's version. I guess, having a vote on it, it just exposes maybe people who are not for it, but the vote would just be the people who are not co-sponsoring it. So,
Now you see how they know they're talking about force the vote, but they don't want to say force the vote. They know they're talking about the disappointment and people on the left being disappointed that they didn't implore the force to vote and didn't do the force to vote move when we were all saying it. So they're having to play cleanup on these shows. And that's what Ro Khanna is doing right here. And now they have to pretend like, oh, but we've been forcing a vote in the background, negotiating in the background, getting secret concessions. Access journalism is getting us this.
I guess our focus has been, how can we actually move legislation as opposed to just having symbolic votes. So I understand people's wanting to do that.
So just
they're still, I mean, it's been weeks. They still don't have a good response. Has it been weeks? Or a week? Maybe a week or two. It's been a while, and they still haven't got a good response to what's going on with you guys doing the force of vote and getting shit done. They still don't have a good response because there is none. Now, let's see where he goes with this.
I hear you correctly, because I know there are some activists who are very focused on this issue.
So he takes up the slang slur, because now it's not a slur to me. They are using it as a slur. And David Sirota picks up the same slur and using the word in the same way. So let's go.
Is it safe to characterize what you're saying as the Republicans with the Kevin McCarthy situation had their kind of concessions and negotiation process out in the open, right on the floor of the House, in the context of the speaker's race? And what I hear you saying is that there have been those negotiations, there have been that back and forth, there has been that pressure, more internally, not necessarily on the floor of the House, and that you feel that the progressive wing of which you are part of has actually extracted.
Did you see the brilliance of David Sirota's storytelling? We just saw it real time. He took that word salad of nonsense from Ro Khanna, and you hear the beautiful retelling of that story he just did. You see why he got an Oscar or was nominated? Was he nominated or he got one? Can't remember. You see now. Now I'm going to back it up so you can hear him beautifully retell this story so that the picture is a lot more beautiful, more detail for the audience. Let's listen.
Focus has been how can we actually move legislation as opposed to just having symbolic votes. So I understand people's wanting to do that.
So just so I hear you correctly, because I know there are some activists who are very focused on this issue. Is it safe to characterize what you're saying as the Republicans with the Kevin McCarthy situation had their kind of concessions and negotiation process out in the open, right on the floor of the House, in the context of the speaker's race? And what I hear you saying is that there have been those negotiations, there have been that back and forth, there has been that pressure, more internally, not necessarily on the floor of the House, and that you feel that the progressive wing of which you are part of has actually extracted concessions, maybe not in as spectacular and as public a way, but that is it your argument that you have extracted those concessions just in a kind of different way, a less performative way?
Ro Khanna's like, no, but that sounds pretty good. So yeah, sure. Yeah, let's go with that one. He beautifully retold nonsense. You see the talent that David Sirota has? That was...
Yes. Now, I will in candor admit that the concessions may not be as much as the Freedom Caucus get. Partly, I think this is
Yeah, so the concessions are not as good as the ones they got, or large, maybe not the word good, may not be, but large or significant. So basically, you got nothing. You got a free lunch. You got a free lunch coupon, and that's you got something? Is that what happened, Ro Khanna? Pelosi passed out to all the progressives, a $20 Sizzler lunch coupon. That's what he's saying is not significant. Man, these people.
The challenge for progressives is a shyness or a hesitation or a humility about power, right? So you're not going to have
a shyness, a humiliation about power. How about a fear of power? I think that's a more accurate description. Or an aspiration of power in your case, Ro Khanna. So let's continue.
Have progressive members temperamentally say, I want to be chair of this subcommittee, or put me on this, the chair of this committee. And you have House Freedom Caucus members making some of those demands. We would say put progressives on committees. And
that's really helping us. That's helping the working class. Next, when your landlord asks for rent, you say AOC or a progressive has been put on a committee, sir, and that is my rent payment. What the fuck does that do for the working class? You see how you have to ask details, because if you go off what they're describing, oh, we received concessions. Like what? Comedian, that is not a concession. That does nothing for us. How about limiting the speaker's power? How about extracting votes on a $15 minimum wage, on a Medicare for all? Like if you don't think Medicare for all is none, how about 6 progressive bills you want them to vote on? Extracting lunch coupons from Sizzler is not a concession that's valid, Ro Khanna.
And so partly, I think it has to be, okay, we have to be more strategic a little bit about power and not as modest about it. But in terms of actual concessions, there were quite a few. I mean, the American Rescue Plan was.
You got to be a little more modest about power. When you see a big bully, you talk to him. You ask him to stop punching you in the face. That's what you do. And that's exactly what the ruling class, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, they're bullies. He's saying you have to be more discreet to those bullies. You have to be one of their henchmen, actually. You have to be their pals and do some of their dirty work on the side and vote for some Ukraine funding so that you can pray that they put you on a committee so that you can get more money, get more attention, because committee assignments are power. So they don't have a good argument against force of vote, but this is them talking about force of vote. Now, this may have been played because it's 2 weeks old. So this was around the force of vote time, but I haven't never seen it. I just stumbled upon it today. Only 316 views. So a lot of people haven't seen this.
Significantly written by the House Progressive Caucus. The number was much, much higher than it ever was under Obama with the financial crisis. The Build Back Better was significantly written with the Progressive Caucus. I was in meetings with the president.
He's naming stuff. He's so far concessions. He's so far named things that has expired, literally, like the child tax credit I think he mentioned. Now he wants credit for legislation that's not passed. Just writing words on a piece of paper is now credit. This is him taking the crumb back and halving the crumb that he gave you and giving it back to you.
President, where we were discussing progressive priorities. I was in meetings with the speaker. We were discussing it. It wasn't lip service. So, you know,
he was in meetings with speakers, talking, having conversations. There you go. We much rather that than to force the vote and extract shit.
I think we can argue how much concession was made to progressives, but the terms before.
This is pretty sad. We're going to be ending.
Or there were almost zero concessions, so we've certainly made progress.
And to be clear, I have said this before. I'll say it again. I think it was a failure to not have a minimum wage hike passed, whether part of the American Rescue Plan or not.
I agree with that. I think we should have fired the parliamentarian.
Right, fire the parliamentarian. But I also.
Did he say that? No, maybe Ro Khanna came out and said that. The Ro Khanna screamed to the mountains, fire the parliamentarian so we can get $15, because I don't remember that. It feels like I would have reported on that if I had heard that. Maybe it happened and something else went on and I just didn't hear it. But you tell me if that happened.
Also believe, I just want to echo this. I've said this before, I'll say it again as well, that the American Rescue Plan was probably the most progressive piece of legislation that has ever passed in my adult lifetime. Let
me explain how that sentence literally means nothing. It's the most progressive in your lifetime. Why is that a threshold, and who cares? It's like when they say this is the most significant investment in climate in U.S. history. U.S. imperialist history, the most significant. You understand? You can give somebody a penny and then give them 5 cents, and you say, "I have significantly give you more money. It's 4 more cents." The starting point matters, and this thing that you're trying to use as some sort of threshold or indication that this is a great thing. In your lifetime, David, this is the most significant by your standards? Whose standards are we going by? the Democrat adjacent person